Hey folks, rinimt here, and welcome back to Crime Opera, the Caterpillar Candids. We have gotten through Aftermath, but there are still some director's commentary to go. Beyond Butterfly. Welcome all. I'm so happy you decided to find out more about the origins of crime opera, because who the hell needs real games we can read a visual novel about the making of a visual novel? Or real friends, for that matter. That is just my not-so-subtle way of acknowledging the precious time you're wasting for the benefit of me and my conceited ramblings. Oh, thanks. While indulging in my mini delusions of grandeur, I will be approaching this almost like a celebrity interview without an interviewer, because I'm much too important to be sharing the spotlight right now. In all seriousness, though, we couldn't be happier or more appreciative of your support for this project, and sincerely hope you've enjoyed our offerings thus far. Part 1. Writing. Visual novels are weird. They're not video games, but are most often classified as them anyway. There are more than simply novels, so it almost seems a shame to try and think of them that way too. Despite all that, they had me extremely curious. Maybe not quite a kid discovering a naughty website for the first time curious. Please laugh, that joke probably caused me another ban of some sort. But curious enough that I was willing to give it a whirl. It took a while for me to sift through what was available to find. Ones that weren't eroge or romance only, however, so actually getting to the point of sitting down and going through one took much too long, especially if you consider how many of the roges I had devoured on my way through. Kidding, of course. I don't even know how many months between beginning my search and settling on the life-altering one it took, but it probably sits somewhere between 6 months and a year. It's funny to even think back to that time, because even though it was about 7 years ago, the state of VNs in English was in a very different place than it is now. They weren't available in abundance just yet, as most of the major translation projects were fan-made. Translators were also very picky. So I read a few higher profile ones. I almost quit fairly early on too. Beginnings were usually exceedingly dry. Sound familiar? I knew absolutely nothing of the multiple routes, etc. Stubbornly, I pushed on. It was always upon reaching the very end of the first path that I became more interested. How the hell could the story possibly continue? Started on the second route, wondering if there was really any way I could be suckered into reading the same scenario over again. Needless to say, there was, and I did it. And before I knew it, the rest of the scenarios came to consume my life for a good couple of years or so. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Somewhere between drinking my youth into oblivion and writing research papers for the advancement of my academic accomplishments, I managed to find a decent amount of time to dedicate to reading them. And what's more, they had a positive impact on my life. Maybe not in a monumentally paradigm-shifting way that would reshape my entire existence, but they got me through some of life's more tedious affairs. That may seem like a long-winded explanation for how I became acquainted with the medium, but there's another point of focus here, and that's the seed that would eventually evolve into crime opera. It was the heavy focus on one particular VN's mafia-like family that got my brain doing backflips, and I started coming with the kinds of inter-familial struggles I would like to see happen. Over the course of a night, I've drawn out the various Gallo family members and some of the issues they might run into throughout their criminal saga. It wasn't until a few weeks later when I realized this couldn't just focus on a small amount of time. It would have to be various times throughout the evolving decades that we would revisit them. In a nutshell, that would become the basis of my idea for the entire series. The selected protagonists, narration switches, and installment plot lines wouldn't completely fall into place until I started writing. I wrote the first 2 chapters in an attempt to do a bit of world building. From that point on, I had to let the story take shape. That's the thing about my writing. I come up with characters and setting and have to trust myself enough that I've plotted them out well enough that the story kind of writes itself. And thus, chapters 3 through 24 just simply happened, and I was merely the typer. That's not to say I had no idea where things were going, just practically. I knew 100% how the final scene of the third novel would end. No matter what, and everything that occurred before that point in time had to serve as a sort of lead up to that ending. In my mind, it all worked out beautifully, which is to say a lot, because I am the royal screw-up of every daydream I've ever had. As for my process, aside from trusting my fingers to do the work, this advertisement is brought to you by hello, ladies. I have a lot of aha moments while walking my dog late at night. That's where a lot of threads wove together, and things that may not have been working very well sorted themselves out, I think. Eventually I came up with a lot of plot points for the second trilogy that way too. I took a few months break after I finished the first 6 chapters of the first novel. Mostly just because I had a lot going on, and I suppose I needed time to allow the differing perspectives to really sink in. When I finally delved back into it, the writing became almost non-stop until I had written not just the first novel, but the entire first trilogy. Mind you, it still took about 3 years total, but that ain't too shabby for weekend-only writing. If readers are interested to know how much of the ending of this first entry was planned, the truest answer I can provide is not a whole lot. I didn't initially know who would survive and who would die, nor did I know exactly how the little narrative views would tie together for the big finale. It kinda just happened. Again, trusting the process. At some point, I got the idea that it'd be neat to do a bit of a fake out with Shauna having blood splattered over her. It seemed the perfect time to have Molly meet her end, as she's too supportive and caring a character to keep alive through the sequels. After all, chaos would not be permitted to ensue with a bright force like her still illuminating in the background. It also made sense to me, at least, that Shauna would sort of evolve into a Molly-like figure, though due to the events in this novel, she would grow further and further away from this world and the rest of her family. I also knew I had to do something a little bit interesting with Gerald and Xander. Having the seemingly less evil one turn out to be the main villain felt right even from the very earliest chapters, where I started planting the seeds that would allow me to do this if I so chose. When I got to that scene where Gerald kills Bianchi, I had the idea how I could repeat the scene later, only expanded, to include the big twist. That was when it was finally decided for sure that I'd go that route. Terry Childers, unfortunately for him, would never have been allowed to live on after all he'd seen. I ran through the various scenarios where he'd be allowed to live and didn't feel confident in any of them, besides which he didn't quite prove to be as interesting as I initially hoped. I know, now we all have this Fandisk short story, and he eventually captivated me in the end after all. Then there's Gavin. Not much of my main child protagonists were going to meet their end in this first installment, which I knew fairly early on. I liked them all too much and wanted to be able to see them grow to at least young adulthood so we could see a natural progression in all of them. As such, Gavin had a bit of a target on his head from the start. Sure, I could have had Shauna run off with him and it wouldn't have changed too much about her arc in the sequel, but there's something about that would have bothered the hell out of me. What sparked me to get out for good, or push her away so badly that she wouldn't allow her guilt to keep bringing her back. I didn't want her back. I wanted her to be the only one to achieve real happiness, even at the cost of losing those closest to her. And it had to be a gradual thing, thus her involvement in the second novel, but eventually I knew she'd be gone. Gavin's death was that catalyst. He's her ultimate reason. He's the reason that we can't fully blame her for walking away. He was my martyr. I should round out the deaths with Rufus. This was one of the hardest things I had to do. I like dogs more than like people. I even named this one after my childhood dog, a black and white bearded collie who lived to the age of 14 and a half. I didn't know I was going to kill him off in the beginning. I even had plans of making him Ron's companion, leading into the second one. But then Birdie happened. Birdie is a terrifying character to write, and I often have to take breaks because it can freak me out. If there's any character that writes his own story, it's him. Honestly, the foreshadowing of this event's significance turned out to be insane, like beyond anything I could have anticipated at the time. So unfortunately, I can't really say more to the major spoilers, but the point is that the death of Rufus was needed. It also led nicely into the following scene between Ronnie and Xander, and is probably more proof that this thing just kept somehow writing itself. I had big plans for the rest of the crew. That's exactly why everything ended the way it did, and it all just cuts off very suddenly with the shooting death of Gerald by Birdie. The aftermath would have to wait 8-9 years to be jumped to that first sequel. It's jolting, it's shocking, it's impactful as hell. I should cover all my bases here and admit that yes, there is an off-screen death placed years before the second novel begins. I did do it for the sake of realism, but I perceived to be so, and to eliminate another string that could have proven complicated to write around. All in all, this prologue entry in the series had to be rooted in tragedy in order for each of these characters to grow into what and who I needed them to be. If there is any regret I have over the writing, it's Bianchi's motivations for kidnapping Izzy. It was a stupid thing to do, and I've since been able to rectify it with the sequels, but it still comes across as a little awkward and stupid for first-time readers. Sorry. Assembling the team. The process of creating the first crime opera visual novel was a lot of stop and go. I had initially created the first trilogy as the Mafiosi series and had no plans of ever making it commercially a viable product. As I continued to write them over 3.5 years, however, I came to love the story and world so much that I knew I needed to give the novel the proper treatment they deserved. I needed wholly original art, music design, specifically bring these characters and their universe to life, and for that, I would need a capable team. As with any visual novel project involving a team, many artists and musicians came and went. Some I had only been in talks with, others had produced designs and concept work, only disappeared without a trace after weeks or months of planning. It was until I met JT's sketch that I was able to truly comprehend the meaning of a comfortable online working relationship. We talked every day, and he understood the potential of the series and what I wanted to do with it. He's a masterclass visual novel artist, a reliable and honest worker, and a fun friend to shoot the shit with every now and then as well. That was when I realized what I needed from the rest of the team. There had been a few other people that I had been working with fairly closely for a time. They also had to part ways with various reasons. I needed the other team members to be as excited and passionate about the project as I was, and if they seemed to lose interest at any point, I had to make the hard decision to cut ties with them. Still feel bad about that in some cases, but I'm encouraged by the fact that I eventually did find the team I needed. With JT working the character sketches, I finally got to work on editing the original versions of the novel and setting up commission work. Sorry, a lot of reading. Considering that my budget consisted merely of whatever I had left in my bank account, I had to start very small with those. The upgrades to the actual VN took a lot of time and effort. Once I really sat down and committed to it, I managed to finish the task fairly quickly. That was around the time when we went through a musician change and solo acapella came on board. JT had been working with him on another project and held him in high esteem. After hearing his other work, I agreed that he would definitely bring the sort of professional music we were hoping for. I was not at all disappointed. Beginning with his very first piece for the project, which was aimed to be Amy's theme, I knew for certain that we had our guy. He was a great partner throughout the whole project's lifespan and helping me figure out various RIMP issues as well. The dude can do it all. The crowdfunding campaign was daunting to plan. It wasn't long before I started looking for some help on that end as well. Talked to a few people on some visual novel forums and got a sense for what needed to be done. Final piece of the puzzle was to find a background artist. Resilience goes a heck of a long way, let me tell you. I was messaging people daily on the Lemonsoft forums, posting ads on various sites, and nothing seemed to be working. But as luck would have it, patience pays off. Gao Nagoon was the artist whose work I had stumbled upon while perusing other visual novel projects in the works. I fell in love with the artist's style and attention to detail and sent a message right away. After initially declining, Gao had a bit of a change of heart and messaged me back to discuss details about the demo. It was agreed that the demo backgrounds would be done free of charge, as there were only 6 of them, and that the rest would be finished once the crowdfunding goal had been met. Everything was in place, it seemed. Steady progress was being made from that point on. Let me tell you, startups like this never come easy, even when things are going as smooth as you think they possibly can. Real life was getting pretty hectic at the start of the summer for me. I was moving to my own place, away from the world of roommates for the first time. I was studying for a certification test for human resources that would potentially grant me 2 designations. Of course, it all had to happen at the same time. As a result, ironically, the team was making more progress than I was. Adding in extra routes as well as writing for the series' 4th novel became pretty difficult, and I knew I would have to really amp up my game in July once everything had settled down. Working a full-time job on top of all that meant I was limited to weekends to work on this project. I say all this because this is what any team leader should come to expect when organizing something of this scale. Real life has a way of bombarding you at the worst possible times. Sure, there are a lot of crowdfunding projects out there with team leads who don't have full-time jobs and are banking their entire lives on the hopes of their campaign's success. I don't recommend taking that route to anyone, at all. Like, ever. Artistic style overviews. How can I even begin to describe JT's character style? He somehow manages to make 80s Japanese anime stylings with old school Americanized flavors. When he adds the first splashes of color as well, you really get an early 1900s vibe, harkening back to my childhood favorites. It has been amazing to see the various stages of the sprites in JT's process. He began with very rough sketches in the beginning before we had properly assembled the team. I was blown away by his vision from the get-go and knew that he understood the characters and their individual appeal. Heck, even with characters who had no appeal at all and only showed up for a very short scene or two, he knew what to do with them. He gave them a life I never even tried to give them. The second stage of the process was the liner. This is the stage where he more or less finalizes the various shapes and odd little details of the sprites. The square jaws became more rounded, facial features became softer, and poses started to look and feel much more natural and human. And the hair has got to be my favorite part of his style overall. The third stage is the soft coloring, where he plots out the base colors and adds a bit more life. Eyes and lips no longer appear so doll-like, and you really start to get an almost 80s anime feel. Initially, I actually loved the stage of his drawing so much, I was tempted to ask him to keep them that way so it can maintain the 80s theme throughout, but I was too curious to see what his idea for the final product would look like. To my pleasure, the final stage didn't take away from that atmosphere. I loved it all. The final colorized materials were added a new dimension of life with the realistic shadows and added details. The finalized hairstyles were vastly improved as well, and I couldn't have been happier with the results. The best part about JT's style is that he manages such varied material while still somehow making it feel cohesive. Male characters differ so drastically from the female ones, and none of them seem out of place. As well, characters like Bianchi have elements of the fantastic thrown in for good measure without detracting from the sense of realism I aim to get out of them. Lastly, JT was very involved with every facet of the commercial version's creation. He had a vested interest in the series as a whole and wanted to allude to future iterations of the characters in very subtle ways whenever he could. I can't give those away, but as the series progresses, these things will be noticeable to readers as well. He added other little nifty details as well, such as matching the eye colors to the protagonists to their respective name colors when they spoke. It's got quite a sense of humor too. Like when I first asked him to draw Rufus. In regards to Gao's background, I got to see those in two stages. First was a sketch layout, and the second was the final version of each. Needless to say, the disparities between the two stages was immense. The sketches were great, but the final products were just out of this world. I struggle to even come up with the words to express what happens between point A to B. It's simply magical. The thing that strikes me the most about these backgrounds is just how imaginative they are. The layout of the first room, for instance, is just so open and believable. I would actually want to live in this world the artist has created. I gave absolute freedom to Giao in terms of the details and couldn't be happier with the way it all turned out. Giao loves working with fun little details as well. If you aren't looking very hard at the paintings on the walls, you could very well think they were copied and pasted from real life. But upon closer look, you will see the more minute details that were put into them right down to the last pixel. I mean, just look at the photos on the walls of Shauna's room and the poster in the back. It's just astounding. There's so much more I want to say about this particular area of work, but really it just has to be experienced firsthand to fully appreciate it. The sounds of tragedy. Solo Acapello had an extremely difficult role to fill when joining our team. The sheer diversity and variety of vibes and atmospheres needed for this project required someone with an unreal reach of the imagination. There's so much I can say about his work, I wouldn't even know where to start. I'm a musician myself and therefore have a gigantic love and appreciation for music, especially actual compositions. Solo understands the difference between composition and a mere tune. His work on the soundtrack goes from relaxing to beautiful to haunting to terrifying and many more places. Every single bass that needed covering, he was able to provide. And then some. He makes me think back to some of my childhood JRPG faves. I get a similar feeling while listening to Soul's more classically inspired songs on this album. I know I'm biased, but I feel the soundtrack in its entirety is an absolute goddamn masterpiece. I'd love to do a track by track with my impressions, but I can do you one better. A track by track by the man himself, solo a cappella. Here he is with his take. Overture Act 1. Just like every classical theater act, the story begins with an overture of all the basic themes. The first 3 notes are the main theme of this entire story, B, C, and F sharp. The first note goes up a half step and then sinks down a tritone, which was so dissonant that it was considered the devil's interval in the early Christian church. That F sharp keeps trying to resolve up where it's supposed to, but keeps falling back down, creating a constant rising tension that never fully resolves. This is used in several tracks, but I'll leave it to you to find them. Other themes include the harp playing Kyrie Ellison, while the woodwinds take the theme from Language of the Waves. Other themes are present, but much more hidden. Language of the Waves. Shauna's theme. The Language of the Waves should be a very calming one. I wrote this one with a picture of a calm, isolated beach in my head. Everything is very simple. I chose the clarinet recorded live for the melody because it has a very simple tone, never rocking the boat. There are no counter melodies, no complex harmonies, and only 2 instruments. It's the kind of thing you don't have to think too hard about and can simply enjoy. Life, they call it. The melody of this is very similar to a certain melody from one of my favorite symphonies. I wonder if anyone will recognize it. I wanted to create something that evoked a peaceful nostalgia that you could lose yourself in. Harmonies keep resolving into the next chords before finding their way back, creating a never-ending loop. The English horn, recorded live, gives it the melancholy tone to wrap it all around. For your own good. This could arguably be the main theme of the story. It uses that opening motif from the title screen over and over with that limping, uneven rhythm. It never fully feels resolved, constantly trying to escape its own dissonances and only creating more in the process. When the parts finally start lining up, it still doesn't sound very welcoming. But sometimes life struggles are there for your own good. Disconnect. A much calmer version of cognitive dissonance. Everything seems like it belongs, but overall there's a feeling that something doesn't line up. Several modified versions of other melodies come in as reminders of what we already know, including For Your Own Good, Pins and Needles, and others. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance arises when your worldview holds contradicting ideas. It creates all sorts of problems when those contradictions are ignored. With this track, I wanted to create a lot of unresolved tension with a lack of tonality and melody, but have the rhythm continue on like nothing is wrong. This is a shorter version of Disconnect gone horribly wrong. Dysfunction. Anyone who knows a Shostakovich string quartets, especially the famous number 8, should find some similarities to this one. It's all very slow and drawn out, with harmonies only occasionally going where you want them. The melodies continue through all 4 parts of the string quartet, only sometimes working together. This entire string quartet was built off of the main theme from the overture. Empty. Just like the title suggests, all the harmonies in this are missing notes. Most harmonies have some kind of direction associated with them, tending to resolve in certain ways, but this one completely ignores that. The synthetic instruments only add to the fakeness of it all. Naivety. Amy's theme. Lots of high keyboard instruments, and the oboe gives this piece a childlike aura. Behind all the twinkling sounds, there's something slightly strange that only shows up every once in a while. The melody from this gets used again in Let's Play. Let's Play. There are a few things creepier than a child with something slightly wrong about them. The entire track sounds like a wind-up toy marching blindly forward, not caring what it knocks over in the process. Melody from Naivete comes back in a slightly darker manner, backed up by lots of mechanical and classical instruments. Little Angel. Izzy's theme. Just like Naivete, this piece uses lots of plucked strings and bells to make everything seem sparkly and clean. Sometimes you just need to sit back and enjoy the world as it is, even if there are a few wrong notes here and there. Meyer. Just like Empty, some harmonies are completely static and don't want to resolve anywhere. This piece evokes the feeling of being stuck somewhere and being unable to do anything about it. Everything flies by in a haze, feeling as if nothing really matters anymore. My World. Birdie's theme. The world truly is a beautiful place if you look in the right places. So much of this piece shows the beauty of childhood, but some of it starts to slip away to a darker place. The melody starts getting lost and the harmonies begin to clash. Everything in this world is so close to being perfect, but once you see the less desirable parts, it becomes impossible to ignore. The main melody shows up in a few other places, but is always very well hidden. Not my problem. Kevin's theme. This track is in no hurry to prove anything. Everything's very relaxed here with a jazzy atmosphere to make sure everything leans a little further back. The piano even improvises its own part in the second half, as if it didn't care who was listening. Out of sight. Every sound used here has been modified, giving everything a ghostly aura. The short track shows that sometimes a mere type of sound can tell us something isn't right. Pins and needles. One of Ronnie's 2 themes. I wanted to share his hesitation around the rest of his family. That feeling of walking around on pins and needles and knowing that one wrong step could set everything off. The tonality here is questionable at best, never feeling perfectly resolved, and the instruments all use very percussive sounds. Wander. The other of Ronnie's 2 themes. I wanted something completely different for this one. I wanted something that would give him a more adventurous feel, hence the guitar sounds. Sometimes we all just need to go get lost and wander somewhere. Tilt the Hourglass instrumental. With this track, I wanted to create the kind of music that your grandparents would sit around and listen to on a quiet evening. Sometimes the world needs to slow down so that we can appreciate what little time we have on it, but inevitably the sand keeps slowing, whisking us away no matter how hard we try. Tilt the Hourglass vocals.
Calling out to Father Time, would you tilt the hourglass? Would you linger for a moment more with me? Would you kindly remind me of the time we lived alive, so we can say, I just want to say goodbye.
I think that was a goodbye. No right answer. Sometimes there's simply no right answer to the questions we face every day. Sometimes the best we can do is sit back and watch while everything slowly falls apart. There's nothing worse than knowing that you can do nothing to help someone. Dies irae. Of wrath that day will dissolve the world into glowing ashes as attested by David together with the Sibyl. Dies irae and the Requiem depicts the day of wrath at the end of days. It's been used throughout history, and this version uses traditional melody heard at the beginning. Nearly every single line in this track has a modified version of that or from Kyrie Ellison. In the end, the 2 melodies overlap in a wild frenzy, with one part singing of the day of wrath while the other asks God for forgiveness. Kyrie Ellison. Christ Ellison. Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. Just like Dies irae, Kyrie Eleison is a traditional part of the Requiem asking God for forgiveness. The organ, strings, and choir create a reverent atmosphere for the words to be carried through. I suppose I should end off with a video song, which is done by my band Ex Gravatus. We're still active, though progress has been weird. We still need vocals on a few songs to end off our first album, and a drummer for most tracks, as we parted ways with our first one after 3 songs. Primarily, we are a symphonic metal band, and our second album is all acoustic. I've written 7 songs for it already, so I guess we're not just that. Anyway, Inescapable was our first song we did. It's probably our most traditionally structured song, as most of our song structures have become ridiculously progressive ever since. I found a lot of the imagery fit with crime opera, and the atmosphere is perfect for an opening video. Demo. Putting a demo together was a little surreal. Writing was all there, and a lot of it was just a matter of plugging in the pieces, replacing old resources with the new ones. There were hiccups, and at first it seemed like a whole lot of them. To my pleasant surprise, though, taking them on just one bug at a time made it seem pretty easy. Discovering a new problem like a line of code for the new GUI I hadn't come across before could seem daunting, scary even. A lot of the time it seemed like I had no idea where to even start. As luck would have it, most often the simple solution would be something as easy as leaving a line of code with a warning next to it, "Do not erase this line!" Sometimes I amaze myself. Really though, I had done a full sweep of edits to the game's writing before my team had started their work, so most of the demo was ridiculously easy to complete. Just a few key instances where I really had to put my director's cap on and think differently, namely sprite placements. The original version of the game just had the simple left, center, and right placements. For this commercial HD version, I had a lot more room to fill on the screen, so I added mid-left and mid-right positions. As well, I had to pay close attention to which characters were facing which way. It became more of a motion picture the way I had to plan each and every scene rather than just throwing everything up on the screen and hoping nobody cared. It really paid off, and honestly wasn't nearly as difficult as I'd initially anticipated it would be. Lastly, JT and Solo were a huge help with making suggestions such as moving the child sprites up when talking so you could see them over the message box, having darkened out sprites for non-talking characters, and a few other little added details. Solo was an especially big help with the nitty-gritty ones like the text box fading to transparent near the top. Original plan was to just release the first chapter as a demo, but we found that we still didn't have enough backgrounds to show off for the preview video, so I had to pay for 8 new backgrounds. Though this would cause a bit of a delay, it allowed us to expand the demo to a full 4 chapters. All in all, it was definitely for the best, even if my bank account was left a little sore in the end. Crowdfunding, rise and fall. The crowdfunding plan went through a series of what had to be 800 iterations. You think I'm joking? It changed on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. A word of advice for those considering going this route for your own project? Kidding, I don't have any. Good luck? I regret nothing though. Seriously, I know where we kinda went wrong with it, and if I could go back in time, I'd probably still do everything the exact same way just because we were ill prepared to get into things like physical editions and the like. Most assuredly, nothing has changed on that front since. Crowdfunding campaigns are absolute hells for first timers, even if you somehow end up getting lucky and getting fully funded in no time at all. The work going into that launch is unimaginable. I think I poured more time and effort into that than the actual game itself that year. In fact, I know I did. As I said in the demo section, that part was pretty easy overall, and really it was a big help going into the launch. I mean, look at all the extra resources we were able to use for our official game page on from it. It definitely didn't feel like it was all for naught. Also, we were able to keep in touch with those who tried to pledge, which was the most helpful in keeping a sort of base of fans. Anyways, putting everything together meant writing the demo, completing the video, getting the extra crowdfunding only graphics done, figuring out the goals and pledge levels. That's the simplified version anyway. I've been keeping track of a lot of the details we needed to present, like for the budget all along, thankfully. As a side note, by far the greatest challenge of self-funding a project like this is the exchange rate. As the standard is USD funds, paying in Canadian dollars took me a lot longer than it otherwise could have. I would highly suggest you take this into consideration if you're in a similar situation. Unfortunately, self-funding became my only option after the crowdfunding campaign failed to meet its goal. We started off fairly strong over the first couple of days as we had a little base of fans who were ready and willing to jump on early. Eventually, even with all the ads I'd spent money on and tried my best to promote, things came to a standstill. After we got halfway through the campaign, I believe people saw things were no longer going the way we'd hoped and decided to hold off to see if anything improved. As it happened, nothing did. That's kind of that. It came, it went. I was faced with the fact that I was going to be out a lot more money after financing the rest of the game on my own. Again, understanding and patience from my team was a huge help over the remainder of the year as I scrambled to pay when I could. Completing the game. We had initially planned for a summer 2019 release, but I knew with the failure of our campaign that we'd likely miss that by a small bit. As well, some of our more ambitious plans had to be scaled back. Instead of full CGs, we opted for specialized sprites instead, thus making the gallery link on the title screen moot. 2019 for me was a frustrating year on the whole. I had to wait for a lot of the rest of the resources to be finished before I could complete the rest of the scene placements, so mostly I just waited on the sidelines until I could finally jump back in. When I did, progress went swiftly and smoothly. I knew well enough when to let it rest and finally aim for a release. Then we got banned from a very well-known website. You know the one. Yeah. Anyway, that's an entirely longer matter, and if you want, you can research what happened online. For now, all I say is that we have no further plans to put projects on the platform. I disagree to this day with their decision, and that will have to be that. Thanks for reading. Hope you enjoy all future Crime Opera games. I guess I'll explain why I can't find it on there. But Still have one little bit to go, which is a word from S. Investor. Thank you for purchasing this short stories fan disc. I made this fan disc for 2 reasons. The first being our devoted fan base, so I wanted to give them something a little extra to tide them over until the second game's release. Secondly, I wanted a shot at redemption regarding Terry's character. I had always had it in my head that he had more to do with things in the first novel than we were able to see. That something like this story was way too long and complex to include as simple tips. The bonus stories were also rattling around in my head for a while, and while not completely crucial to the crime opera universe, they were still worth a little exploring. The epilogue in particular serves as an extra bit of closure for those who felt the first game ended too abruptly. As such, you can take these or leave them in the terms of their own canonicity. If you don't like them, don't consider them as truth when reading the sequels. If you do, that's cool too. They'll never be referenced again, so you can do whatever you like. In any case, I hope you can absolutely promise a sequel to deliver on any and all expectations, regardless of what you think of these short stories. I do hope you like them anyway, though. So, final note, I want to give a wholehearted thank you to eastasiasoft and Ratalaika Games for bringing this franchise to consoles. Please enjoy Crime Opera 2. So, I will start on Crime Opera 2 sometime. I've got some plans for various things. But that does wrap up Crime Opera The Caterpillar Candids. Whew, that was 36 minutes straight of talking. Thank you for watching. Thank you eastasiasoft for the code. If you enjoyed the video and this short little series, consider tossing a like, comment, subscribe, maybe click the bell for notifications. Also be sure to check out the description below. Various links, social media, Discord, come hang out, get notifications there as well. And until next time, this is rinimt signing out. Bye!